Welcome to Lying and Cheating. Please like this video and subscribe. Lying and Cheating. When I came back from my deployment, it wasn't the homecoming I'd imagined for 8 long months. There I was, standing in my own doorway on Halloween night, bag still slung over my shoulder, only to find my wife with another man, right there in my bed. I don't think anything could have prepared me for that sight, for the gut-wrenching blow it dealt. It's ironic, isn't it? Being in love. It's like the greatest blessing you can get, but also the most dangerous game you'll ever play. Loving someone isn't just trusting them with your heart. It's trusting them with your future, your soul. And here I was, realizing I'd placed everything on the wrong hand. Life's about risk. That's something I understand pretty well. You see, I signed up for the Marines fresh out of high school. I didn't come from much, so enlisting felt like the best way to build a life I could be proud of. I was just a kid back then, a wide-eyed private with big dreams. Over the years, I put in the blood, sweat, and grit, and now I've made it to corporal. It wasn't easy. I've been busted down and built back up again. But through all the challenges, all the sacrifices, I stayed. My loyalty, my commitment, was to the core, and I'd always planned for it to be that way, maybe for the rest of my life. Or at least, that's how I used to feel. Now, I'm standing at a crossroads, questioning everything. My wife and I have been married for 3 years. 3 years that, in the beginning, felt like something out of a dream. When I first put that ring on her finger, I was crazy in love, completely head over heels. Everything she did made my heart ache in the best way possible. The way she'd look at me with those soft eyes, the way her smile would lift my spirits, even on the toughest days. And her laugh? Man, her laugh could pull me out of the darkest mood. She'd do this thing, twisting her hair when she was nervous, and it just melted me. I thought I'd hit the jackpot, that this woman was my forever. Now, staring at the reality of who she's become, or maybe who she always was, I'm not so sure I even recognize her anymore. I thought I'd be coming home to the same woman I'd left, the same love we'd shared. Now, I don't even know if I can say I love this woman at all. It's hard to even put into words how this all feels. I'd been away for 8 months, serving overseas, and every single day was a countdown to coming back to them. My wife, my little girl, my family. But it was while I was on base, surrounded by the guys, that I'd start hearing things, whispers I didn't want to believe. They'd tell me, "Listen, Marine, the women who marry us, they're in it for the perks, for the steady check, the health care, the vacations." They'd joke about it, but there was a bitter edge behind their words. They'd say, "The minute you're deployed, they get lonely. They bring some guy into your home, maybe even your own bed." I brushed it off every time. That wasn't my wife, not my family. Sure, maybe some people went through that, but my marriage was different, or so I thought. I trusted her. I thought I knew her. But now, I don't know what to believe. My confidence, my faith in us, it feels shattered. Maybe I was a fool, too quick to assume I was immune to the same heartbreak others warned me about. Maybe I thought I was special. The trip home was something I clung to, like a lifeline. It was supposed to be the thing that kept me going, the light at the end of a grueling, seemingly endless tunnel. A 12-hour flight from the base, and every moment I spent cramped up in that seat was another minute closer to being home. I couldn't wait to get back to my family, to finally hold my little girl again. She's my whole world, that kid. My sweet princess, her smile, her laugh, that's what I missed the most. It's like every day I was gone, I could feel this ache in my chest, like getting sucker punched, over and over, because I wasn't there to watch her grow, to be her dad in the ways that really count. Video calls were all I had. I'd see her on the screen, blowing kisses, showing me the toys she'd gotten, or the new dresses she was wearing. But a screen isn't enough. It doesn't compare to the real thing. I wanted to surprise them, coming home just in time for Halloween. I'd imagine the whole scene in my head, walking through the door to their happy screams, maybe taking my daughter trick-or-treating in her little costume. I pictured her dressed as a princess or a tiny witch, with a bucket full of candy. I'd thought about what it'd be like to finally tuck her in, to kiss her goodnight after all those months apart. But life doesn't always go according to plan, does it? When I stepped into my house, it was eerily quiet. I noticed the faint smell of cologne in the air, not mine. A hollow feeling started creeping into my stomach as I walked down the hall toward our bedroom. My heartbeat was deafening in my ears. Part of me didn't even want to know what I'd find, but I couldn't stop. I pushed open the door, and there they were. My wife, the woman I'd given everything to, and some stranger, tangled up in the sheets on our bed. My bed. Halloween or not, I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. Time seemed to slow down, every second stretching out painfully. I didn't make a sound, didn't yell or curse. I was too shocked, too broken. I just stood there, feeling the betrayal sink in, deeper and deeper, like ice freezing in my veins. In that moment, all those warnings from the guys on base echoed in my mind. I could hear their voices, clear as day, mocking my naivety. But this wasn't just some story. It was my reality, my life unraveling right before my eyes. Looking at her, I felt a mix of anger, pain, and something I couldn't quite name. Betrayal, sure, but also a numbness that came creeping in, like my mind was protecting me from feeling the full weight of it all at once. She looked up, her eyes wide with shock, and I could see the guilt, the fear written all over her face. It was as if she knew exactly what she'd done, the trust she'd shattered, the life she'd thrown away for a fleeting thrill. And the guy? He just looked at me, frozen, probably too terrified to move. I turned and walked out. The last thing I wanted was a scene. I was too exhausted, too defeated to fight or demand explanations. I just grabbed my bag and walked back down that hallway, the same hallway I dreamed about walking through for months, and let myself out the door. Standing outside, with the Halloween moon hanging low in the sky, I looked up and took a deep breath, trying to pull myself together. The street was alive with kids in costumes, laughing and running from house to house, their buckets heavy with candy. Their happiness felt like salt in a wound I couldn't ignore. I didn't want to scare my little girl by walking in there with anger, or worse, a broken heart I couldn't mask. So I stood there on the curb, bags at my feet, taking in the cool night air, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Walking into my house that chilly Halloween night, the excitement in my chest was almost too much to contain. I'd been waiting for this moment for 8 long months, waiting to be home, to hold my family close, to finally feel the warmth of my own house wrap around me. But instead of the laughter, the joy, or even the familiar hum of everyday life, there was nothing. A thick, unsettling silence met me at the door, and as I stood there, it took a second for my mind to grasp what felt so out of place. The living room was empty, every shadow still and stretched long against the walls from the dim streetlight outside. My stomach nodded, but I convinced myself they'd just stepped out, maybe to grab one last bag of candy or take our daughter around the block to trick or treat. My bags thudded softly on the floor as I set them down, and I took a long look around. I'd left this place in high spirits, certain that no matter what, this house would always welcome me back with open arms, that the people I loved would be here, waiting. But tonight, something felt wrong. Very wrong. I sank into the couch, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling spreading through my chest. I pulled out my phone, dialing my wife's number, expecting her voice to fill the silence and melt away my growing fears. But it just rang and rang, echoing hollowly in the empty room. I shot her a text, something simple like, "Where are you?" Even though that gnawing doubt was twisting in my gut. I sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for her name to pop up, but nothing came. The seconds dragged on, heavy and still, each one seeming to add weight to that thick, eerie quiet in the house. Finally, I stood up, restlessly pacing to the kitchen. I grabbed a glass of water, my hands shaking slightly as I tried to convince myself everything was fine. Just then, a faint thump echoed through the house, cutting through the silence. I froze, heart hammering, straining to hear where it was coming from. The sound came again, muffled but undeniable, somewhere beneath me. The basement. Logic told me not to jump to conclusions, but my mind raced with images, memories, and a deep, nagging dread. I knew I had to check it out, even if every instinct screamed for me to turn around. I made my way to the basement door, each step echoing through the house like a drumbeat. I opened it carefully, holding my breath. As I started down the steps, the sounds became clearer. Voices, muffled and close, and then a low, male groan, the kind of sound that could only mean one thing. I felt my blood go cold, and my mind blanked. I was back at the base, the rush of adrenaline taking over, but this time, it was worse. This was my home, my family, my life. But I kept going, moving down the stairs as quietly as I could, each step blending into the soft, carpeted floor. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. One of those twisted dreams where everything you've ever loved is shattered before your eyes, and you can't wake up. And there they were, my wife and another man, tangled together in a way that seared into my mind. But what made it unbearable was who he was. This wasn't some stranger. It was a guy from high school, someone I'd known in passing, someone who had no right being here in my home with my wife. Time stopped. I could feel my pulse thundering in my ears, and a fiery rage I'd never known surged through me. Without even thinking, I was on him. I grabbed him, yanked him off her, and laid into him. My fists moved on instinct, fueled by betrayal and anger that ran too deep for words. I didn't give him the beating of a lifetime, but I made sure he'd leave with a split lip and a black eye, something to remember me by. All the while, my wife was screaming, her voice pleading, but her words were just noise in the background. I couldn't hear her apologies. I didn't care to. She was part of the pain, part of the betrayal, and in that moment, she was no one to me. I left them there and stumbled back up the stairs, numb and hollow. I dropped onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall, unable to process what had just happened. My mind kept going back to all the warnings my buddies at base had given me. They'd laugh about marriage, telling me I was a fool to believe in loyalty or love. They'd say that wives were quick to find comfort elsewhere, quick to turn their backs. I'd ignored them, laughed it off, thinking my marriage was different. I thought my wife was different, but I was wrong. And that realization sank like a stone in my chest, leaving me feeling like a stranger in my own life. From that night on, I stopped thinking of this house as my home. My real home was back at base, where loyalty wasn't a question, where betrayal wasn't part of the deal. Here, everything felt tainted, broken. We stayed married, technically, but it was just a word now, a title that meant nothing. She tried to reach me, tried to apologize, to tell me it was a mistake. But every time I looked at her, all I saw was the man in my basement, the betrayal carved into her face. I couldn't feel anything for her anymore. When she smiled at me, I felt hollow, my heart cold and unresponsive. When she hugged me, I'd just stand there, barely wrapping one arm around her, going through the motions. And when she tried to kiss me, I'd turn my head, pretending I didn't see the hurt in her eyes. We used to have a ritual, a way to bond. We'd take road trips to new places just to try the best food, to share something we loved together. But those days were gone. The last time we'd done that was before I deployed. Now, the thought of doing anything with her felt like a mockery of what we once had. Every time I brought up the idea of divorce, she'd break down, throwing herself at me, tears streaming down her face, telling me she was sorry, that she'd never hurt me again, that she still loved me. But her words were just that, words. Empty promises that meant nothing. I used to believe in forever, in building a life together, in facing whatever came our way as a team. Now, I was just a shell of that man, living with someone who felt like a stranger. Late at night, when I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, I wonder if there's any way to move past this, any way to forgive and forget. But every time I close my eyes, I see them in the basement, hear the sound of their voices, feel the crushing weight of betrayal. I don't know if I can ever forgive her. And honestly, I don't think I want to. The man who once loved her is gone, replaced by someone colder, someone who doesn't believe in love or trust anymore. I feel like I'm trapped, chained to a life that's no longer mine, a life built on broken promises and shattered dreams. So, here I am, stuck between the past and a future I can't bring myself to face. I stay, but only out of duty, out of habit. I tell myself that maybe one day I'll find the strength to walk away, to leave this broken life behind and start over. But until then, I'm just a ghost in my own story, living in the shadow of what could have been, haunted by the memories of the life I thought I had. She finally confessed, and those words shattered the fragile illusion I had been clinging to. I slept with him 3 times, she admitted, her voice quavering. In that moment, the weight of her betrayal felt like an anchor dragging me to the depths of despair. 3 times? My mind was reeling. While I was away, sacrificing everything for our family, she had betrayed me, not just with any man, but with someone I knew, someone from my past. The thoughts spiraled through my mind like a chaotic storm, leaving devastation in its wake. I was a soldier. I had trained to face physical combat, to withstand enemy fire and endure the harshest conditions. But nothing could prepare me for this emotional onslaught. The very idea that the woman I loved, the woman I thought was my partner in this life, had shared our bed with another man felt like a betrayal I could never comprehend. Her eyes welled with tears, and I could see the remorse etched across her face. "What I did was a mistake," she pleaded, desperation lacing her tone. "I miss you. I want things to be the way they were before. Please." It was almost heartbreaking to witness her breaking down. Yet, as I stared at her, I realized I felt more like a stranger than a husband. We didn't argue. It was as if we had crossed a line where fighting was futile. Instead, we had settled into a chilling silence that made us feel like distant roommates, existing in the same space but worlds apart. She had suggested counseling multiple times, as if talking to a stranger would somehow fix everything. But I couldn't imagine sitting in an office, hashing out feelings and memories I was desperate to forget. "They'll just tell us to make up," I thought bitterly, shaking my head at the thought. The intimacy of touching her, of even making eye contact for longer than a fleeting moment, sent shivers of discomfort down my spine. I couldn't do it. Not now. Not with the walls she had built between us. Then there was my daughter. I glanced at her as she played in the living room, her laughter echoing off the walls like a sweet melody amidst the dissonance of my emotions. She looked so much like me, blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and those ears that were unmistakably mine. I didn't need a DNA test. She was my blood, my life, and I would never abandon her. Even if she weren't biologically mine, I knew I could never walk away from her. She was my light in this dark tunnel, the sole reason I hesitated to end my marriage completely. I thought of my brothers back at base who had warned me, "When you go home and find your wife on your bed with someone else, we're going to say we told you so." Yet one brother had taken a different approach. He hadn't gloated. Instead, he looked me squarely in the eyes and said, "You're ruining your life with the wrong person. If you don't divorce, you'll be miserable. You could find someone better, someone who truly appreciates you." His words resonated deeply, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stuck. I wanted to go back to base, back to the camaraderie, the brotherhood that felt safer than the chaos of my home life. But with the pandemic keeping us all on lockdown, that escape felt more elusive than ever. As Halloween approached, I was forced to confront the reality that our lives had become a masquerade. She wore a mask of regret, but behind it, I saw the woman who had made promises and shattered them. And me? I wore my own mask, one of indifference, hiding the pain and turmoil that churned just beneath the surface. But then something shifted. One evening, while I was lost in thought on the couch, my daughter came bursting into the living room, dressed as a little witch complete with a bright green hat and a flowing black cape. "Daddy, look!" she squealed, her eyes shining with pure joy. At that moment, my heart felt like it cracked open just a little bit. Her laughter rang out like a beacon in the dark, momentarily chasing away the shadows that loomed over me. I couldn't help but smile, a small, tentative smile that spoke of hope. In that innocent moment, I felt a flicker of love for her, a reminder of the joy I thought had been extinguished. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me, her tiny face aglow with happiness. "Daddy, I love you. You're my favorite person." Those simple words pierced through the darkness that had enveloped my heart. It was in that moment I realized that while my marriage was strained and fraught with uncertainty, I still had the capacity to love her. As the days passed, I found myself navigating this fragile new reality. My wife and I still existed in a painful limbo, but I began to shift my focus. My daughter needed me, and I wanted to be the father she deserved. I realized I didn't have to allow my wife's betrayal to define our entire family. With Halloween creeping closer, I was reminded of the significance of masks, of how they can hide true emotions. My wife wore her mask of regret, yet I couldn't let that dictate my happiness any longer. I wanted to embrace the love I felt for my daughter fully, even if it meant redefining what my family looked like. One Halloween night, I watched as my daughter excitedly sorted through her candy haul, her eyes sparkling with glee. She kept offering me treats, her laughter filling the air. "Daddy, this is my favorite. You have to try it." In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of warmth wash over me. I could choose to celebrate this love, to let go of the bitterness that threatened to swallow me whole. As I took a piece of candy from her small hands, I realized I was starting to heal, to let the shadows recede a little. While the future with my wife remained uncertain, I resolved to prioritize my daughter's happiness above all else. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. It would require strength, resilience, and the willingness to confront my pain. But I wasn't alone. As I held her close that Halloween night, the chill of the autumn air brushed against our cheeks, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. I understood now that I could rebuild, that I could find a way to navigate this complex web of emotions, even amidst the chaos of betrayal. I might not have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I would not let this define me. I would rise from this darkness, for her sake and my own. And as the moon cast its silver glow outside, illuminating the path ahead, I felt a glimmer of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, I could find joy again. Maybe I could learn to love anew, to embrace my daughter with a heart unshackled from the past. And in that realization, I felt the dawn of a new chapter begin, full of hope, love, and the promise of brighter days ahead. Thanks for watching my story. I recommend checking out one of my past stories. Subscribe to the channel and give it a like.